Hey YouTube, it's me. This is a little bit different than the usual content on the channel, as you may have noticed. I got a request from Mario Kart Wii 9, aka MKW Anthony, to sort of go over this level in the editor. And just sort of, explain all the setups, all of the hidden difficulty, why I did certain things, how a player is meant to do certain things, and also just, show the level in the view mode so that if someone is so inclined, they can recreate the level to practice some of the individual tricks a little bit better than they could do with the practice doors in the level. This is actually something I've been thinking about doing for quite a while now. Just, with the practice situation in Mario Maker 2 being what it is, it's always good for the community to look for ways to mitigate the lack of a level editor. And I think that the reason that an editor is so important to practice and was so useful in Mario Maker 1 is that it gives you all the same resources the creator had when designing the level for the purposes of practice, which is just not something you have as a player in Mario Maker 2. So I think, it's definitely beneficial for hard level creators to be able to share some of their information for the player, just to give them the same options that they had while making the level, and to sort of level the playing field, so to speak. Yeah, let's get into it. So right off the bat here, this first trick is pretty difficult. You throw the shell at this indicator, and then you're going to do a ground pound to kill this dry bones. And then you're going to cancel your ground pound after you've caught up with the shell to bounce on it. So there are a couple ways of doing this. The way I did it, and I think probably the easiest way to do it, is to throw the shell fairly early, ground pound for a fairly long way, and then cancel it probably right around here, in order to land on the shell down here. You can also, I've seen people throw the shell late and then do a really short ground pound, cancel immediately, and then use a twirl to catch up, and that works. But all that really needs to happen is you need to ground pound through this dry bones, have the shell go down this path to collect this red coin, and then land on the shell down here. Obviously there's going to be a lot of variance no matter what strat you use for this, so it really helps to be able to track both Mario and the shell simultaneously, and then just cancel your ground pound when you see that their horizontal or x-axis positions are roughly equivalent. And yeah, twirls are your friend. Next you're going to grab this Koopa here. You're going to drop it as you're falling down and then do a ground pound cancel to kick the shell into these on-off switches right here, which is going to allow you to progress over here. The reason I have this elaborate setup is so that you cannot grab this shell until you're already moving downwards, and that's just to prevent you from doing a shell drop instead of doing this sort of delayed ground pound shell jump. But it's pretty consistent. No matter where you are down in this tunnel, this thwomp will trigger, which will allow the shell to fall, and the conveyors have it lined up so that the shell's going to fall pretty much straight down, and if you land on the shell here and you're falling down, you're going to grab it like pretty much right at the indicator, and then immediately release and do your ground pound. Then you're going to land on this bomb right here, probably right around here, where this sort of on-off block line is. Takes 2 twirls usually to get onto that bomb. It is possible to overshoot, and it's also possible to undershoot. So you have to be conscious of your momentum when you're trying to land on this bomb. And then you grab this shell here off this ledge and you throw it over here. It is possible to also have not enough momentum after you've landed on this bomb, and you'll grab the shell and you won't quite have enough distance to land on it. So for the shell landing here, you need to land on the shell right as it's, like after it's bounced on this note block. So if you land on it too late, it's going to just fall onto this spike and you won't be able to re-grab it. But if you land on it right as it bounces on the note block, it's going to bounce, you land on it, it's going to fall back down and bounce up again for you to grab on the wall jump. You're going to need to slide down a little ways. If you try and do an instant wall jump, you're just going to go over the shell. So you're probably going to want to control your jump so that you end up right around here after landing on the shell, and then slide down to the indicator, grab the shell and throw it. And then same thing here, you need to land on it right on that note block. Otherwise it's going to land on the spike and it's not going to go up. And then for this one, as long as you wall jump at the indicator, you shouldn't have any issues with colliding with the one-way. You should always be landing on this half of the shell and its bucket, so you just throw the shell and hold jump and it should be pretty much auto. So next up is this sort of big shell turnaround to mini shell jump sequence. This is probably the hardest sequence in the level. I didn't intend for it to be that way. It just is. So there are a couple factors at play here that makes this difficult. Obviously you need to turn to face left in order for you to kick this big shell without having the small shell collide with it. The problem with that is this spike. If you turn left too hard, it's very easy to hit this spike. So you need to be able to turn left and preserve as much momentum as possible. So the way I did it for my clear was sort of like an L tap. I would turn to face left right at this arrow, and then I would continue to face left until I got to this twirl indicator. I would then twirl, and immediately after twirling, switch to holding right, and then continue from there. And that worked well for me, but I know Yoshi was having troubles with that, so he did it more like a flick. He did a quick turn back, and then twirled, and then he turned left here. I'll get into that right now, actually. It's possible to land on this shell, like up here, which is way too high. You're just going to send yourself right into this saw if you do that. So you actually need to be moving right here in order to get over this spike, and then you need to continue to be facing left. So you need to go back to left so that you don't land on the shell too high, and then do your mini shell jump. So the mini shell jump is the other really hard part of this, beyond just actually landing on this shell and getting over the spike. And that's just by virtue of Mario Maker 2's physics. There are two things that make the mini shell jump deceptively difficult with this particular setup. The first is obviously the throw delay. You need to throw it pretty much right as you're landing on the big shell in order to actually throw it at the right time to land on it. And the second is something I'll demonstrate here, actually. In Mario Maker 2, and this is different from Mario Maker 1, when you throw an item, it sort of locks you into the direction you're facing for a little bit. So I'm going to press right immediately after throwing this shell. Nice. Let's just pretend that didn't happen. And you'll notice here, see how Luigi sort of gets locked into facing to the left for a couple of frames? It just does that. It doesn't matter how soon after throwing the shell I switch directions. I'm always going to get locked for a little bit. That's why mid-airs no longer work in this game. So the reason that makes this trick more difficult is that you need to be facing left when you land on this shell. Otherwise, this shell is going to collide and you're going to die. But you also need to throw this almost immediately after landing on the big shell in order to get the right timing for the mini shell jump. Double butt, you also need to be facing right in order to get the mini shell jump to go in the right direction. So the issue is that if you're facing left, and then you try and throw right as you land on the big shell and then turn around, which would be pretty much fine in Mario Maker 1. It might give you a midair, but it would work. If you try and do that, you're just going to get locked, and you're going to throw the shell the wrong way. And yeah, if you try and turn around before you land on the shell to prep yourself, the shells are going to collide. So you need to strike this balance that right as you land on the big shell, you quickly turn around and throw the shell, and then hold jump to get up here. So that's just what makes that so precise. Here, you twirl over these spikes to grab this shell, and you're going to throw the shell right here so that it goes onto this donut block and hits the note block, collecting the red coins. Then it's going to bounce off this wall, bonk on the ceiling, go down here over Mario's head, bounce off this wall and onto this track. Now Mario's falling all the while that this is happening. So if you just throw the shell's going to be way above your head. So you need to do 3 air stalls here. Pretty solid air stalls. If you drop an input at any point, you are likely going to be too low. But as long as you land on the shell, you're going to be fine. There's 2 things that can happen. The first is what is supposed to happen, and that's that the shell lands on these spikes, and then you land on it like a surfing shell jump, and then you land on the bomb at this box. It's also possible that you ground pound stall not optimally, but well enough to bounce on the shell, and you're going to bounce on it before it lands on these spikes, just like right out of the air. And that's going to make you usually about 2 blocks higher than you'd usually be. It's still salvageable, but to get the momentum to land on this bomb and grab the shell that's going to be off this spike, what you need to do is you need to go straight up and then commit to holding forward. But if you land on the shell up here and then go straight up and commit to holding forward, it's much easier to hit this saw or to overshoot this bomb. So if that happens, you need to be wary of that. The other thing is that you'll notice when I showed off under this saw, there's no block here. And what that means is that if you throw this shell too far ahead of this indicator, or with way too much momentum, it's going to hit the wrong half of this note block. The note block is going to do its sort of compression animation. It's going to go down, but the shell's already going to be off the note block before it goes up, which is what bounces the shell up. And so what's going to happen is that it's going to go down, the shell's going to bounce off this wall and come back while it's still down, and then it's going to push the shell up, and the shell's going to overshoot by a long shot. So you need to make sure that you're throwing that shell right here without too much momentum so that it actually lands on this donut block first and then goes into the note block. From here, you're going to drop the shell at this indicator so that it lands on this note block. And then you're going to twirl immediately after dropping. There's no indicator for that because there just isn't enough space, but you do need to twirl. And then you're going to wall slide for a bit until you get to this diagonal track block right here, and then you're going to wall jump. You're not going to hold run. You're just going to kick this shell, and then you're going to twirl at this indicator to bounce on the shell here. If you do hold run, you'll grab the shell, and the only way to get up here, if you grab the shell, is to do a shell jump, and that's what this block is for. It's filled with a large winged boo ring, so if you do manage to do a shell jump, get up here, then you're going to be dead coming back down because of the boo ring. So that's just to force you to actually do this trick instead of just shell jumping. This trick, the indicators here obviously aren't perfect because, again, there's going to be a lot of variance depending on when you drop the shell, how soon after dropping the shell you twirl, how long you wall slide, how high up you are when you wall jump, and so all of those things are going to change the time that you're going to need to twirl because they're going to change the trajectory of the shell when you kick it. But again, just like the first trick, you kind of just need to be able to react to where the shell is and where Mario is to adjust for that. Then you get up here. This is just a wall jump onto here. So for this shell carry, it's actually kind of deceptive. In Mario Maker 1, when you did these no-jump shell carries, you wanted to drop this shell as early as possible so that it actually landed on the ground, and then you would grab it off the ground on the wall jump. In Mario Maker 2, if you try and do that, you cannot. What's going to happen is you're just going to kick the shell. I'm going to try and demonstrate here, like that. You won't grab it. So in Mario Maker 2, rather than dropping super early, like in Mario Maker 1, you want to drop pretty late and then wall slide, like so. And then here, this is just a ground pound shell jump. I'm sure if anybody's really considering beating this level, you probably already know how this works, but I'll explain it just in case there's anyone who's watching for entertainment purposes, which I'm sure you can find better entertainment than this, but I appreciate your viewership. In Mario Maker 2 versus in Mario Maker 1, when you do a ground pound, you no longer gain height, which you did in Mario Maker 1. You gained a couple pixels of height. And so if you tried to do this exact same motion in Mario Maker 1, you would do your ground pound cancel and the shell would go under you and you'd overshoot it. But because you gain no height in Mario Maker 2, it lines up perfectly so that if you are moving downwards at max downward speed, assuming, well, max natural downward speed, so there's not like a thwomp or anything pushing you down, and you throw a shell and then do a ground pound cancel, it will line up automatically to have you land on that shell no matter what, no twirls needed. So from there you're just going to land on this shell, and then this shell jump is actually a little bit deceptive. You can't just do a shell jump here, or else your momentum to do this reclaim setup is going to be really wacky. So what I tend to do is try and hug this spike as closely as possible to do this shell jump, so that you aren't too close to it so that the shell will go through you, but you're not, you're like barely within range of shell jumps. And then you're going to use the fact that you get a slight acceleration boost after changing direction when you're locked to facing a direction after throwing something to your advantage, to gain a bunch of acceleration this way, and that's going to help you not to hit this spike right here. So for this reclaim setup here, you're actually reclaim distance from both of these walls, so it's possible to get the reclaim off this right wall and off this left wall, and it's possible to land on the shell in both cases. But the positioning of the shell is going to change very slightly. If you get it off this right wall, the shell is going to be slightly farther ahead, so you need to cut it closer to this spike to get a bit more momentum. If you reclaim off this left wall, you don't need that momentum. You can just twirl and it should line up automatically to bounce you up into these on-off switches. There is a red coin here, which is why you actually need to do the reclaim. So that's that. Then this whole string here is basically a semi-auto section. As long as you hit these on-off switches and are holding run, forward, and jump, you're going to bonk this shell and be able to land on it down here, which is going to set you up for the triple jump to get over here. If you're too far ahead, sometimes you can land over here, and that's going to mean you're going to triple jump right into this spike. So if you notice that you're pretty far ahead, it's easy to just do a controlled double jump to save that, or even a slight turn back and twirl here to make sure you avoid that spike. But yeah, other than that, it's just auto. It just works like that. So once you've grabbed this shell and landed on this bonsai, you have this trick, which is it's pretty difficult, I will say, but thankfully this whole screen after it isn't too bad, so it's not brutal. But basically here it's very similar to the first trick in that the position of Mario has a lot of variables that are going to affect it, and I guess in this case Luigi, and the same applies for the position of the shell. And what that means is that because you need to line up with the shell at a specific way down here, you need to be watching both Luigi and the shell in order to actually get this trick to work. So there are two ways you can do this. One is that you drop the shell right as Mario is starting to move down, similar to the timing you need to drop the shell for this reclaim. if you drop the shell on this reclaim while Mario is fully accelerating downwards, usually the reclaim isn't going to line up, and if it does line up, you're probably going to be too low down. So you want to drop it right as Mario's just starting to move down. But if you do that here, just as Mario's starting to move down, you're going to want to do a really short ground pound cancel. And then you should just line up with the shell, and then kick it into the on-off switches behind this saw to turn these blue blocks, which will be on at this point in the level, off. If you drop it while Mario's accelerating fully downwards, you're probably going to want to be doing a slightly longer one, and you're also going to want to delay a little bit longer after this twirl. And that's just going to make it so that you are going to be lining up with the shell much later, much lower down, and then you're just going to kick it and go over. So again, just something you have to be conscious of and be able to react and adjust to. And that's one of the great things about New Soup shell levels, is that you have so many movement options between twirling and ground pounds and wall slides and stuff that are just going to allow for those micro adjustments as long as you're paying attention. So then this whole room, this whole screen is pretty trivial. This shell landing can be a little bit tough. It's possible to undershoot it and overshoot it when it gets trapped on this conveyor. If you twirl too late, you're going to go right over the shell, land on the conveyor, and you're dead because of these hidden blocks and these spikes. If you twirl too late, you're going to land on the very corner pixel of this shell, and you're going to either go into these spikes or you're going to end up on the wrong side of this brick block and you won't be able to bop the bomb. So you need to twirl just right to land on it and get under this brick block. Then you're going to wall slide for a little bit. If you wall jump instantly, you're going to go into this spike or bonk on this brick block again, and then you just hold, jump, run, and left, and both of the bomb bonks are automatic. It should just wind up on this little ledge here, which it needs to be on to activate that on-off switch. And you should bounce on the shell, which will have slid back here and wind up here. So then here, this part, this applies for all New Soup levels, but I had some deaths like this during uploads, which were frustrating. But basically, if you throw the shell like right perfectly in the middle, and then try and twirl immediately, you're not going to be able to. You're going to get locked into the throwing animation, and you'll short the jump. I'll try and demonstrate here. See, like that? The twirl just kind of got cancelled by my throwing animation, and I didn't have enough distance. So you want to throw the shell pretty early, like that. Obviously the on-off state was wrong there, but I actually landed on the shell. So then for this part here, this is the nigh screen. You're going to want to throw this shell into this spring. It's going to go down here, break this brick block. Try saying that 5 times fast. Break this brick block, break this brick block. And then you're going to land on it here, into the claw, tiny shell jump, yata. So there are a few variables to be aware of here. It is possible for this shell that's going to be going over here and collecting your key and everything to A, hit this muncher and not break the brick block, which is going to block you when you land on it here, or B, just go over entirely. And if that happens, it means that you threw the shell too early, and what happens is that the shell went inside of the spring, hit this spike, then started moving back this way, and then the spring propelled it as it was coming out the other side, and that gave it some extra juice, and it just went right over or into the muncher. So you need to make sure you throw the shell like right here so that the shell gets bounced back immediately as it hits this edge of the spring, because if it goes inside the spring, odds are it's going to overshoot. So you need to make sure that you're throwing the shell once you're fully outside of the spring. And then here, you're going to ground pound here so you don't go into these saws, and then you're going to twirl somewhere around here to line up with the shell. Obviously, depending on where you threw it and how quickly did your ground pound cancel. The positioning of that's going to vary slightly. So again, common theme in this level, you need to be able to track with your eyes both Mario and the shell in order to react and land on it down here. And then for this last Nye trick, I just realized this pipe is... that really bothers me. Well, no one's ever going to see that in the uploaded level, but that sucks. Okay, anyway, moving on. There are a few last variables at play with this Nye trick. You're going to twirl into the claw, do a spin jump, shell jump up here. So things that can happen. 1, you twirl way too late and you just don't get in the claw. That's your own fault. Don't twirl too late. 2, you twirl way too early and the claw is on the wrong part of its swing and it's going to kill your momentum and you're not going to be able to get up there. The next thing is if you jump slightly too early, you're going to get this shell jump lower down and it's going to send you into this spike. So it never hurts to either do a little turn back to ensure that you're not going to die right at the end here, or to throw the shell very slightly late and then do a really late twirl, which is actually what I did for the clear, although that is a very risky strategy because if you throw too late, the shell's just going to go up on top of the spike and it's not going to line up at all. So really you just want to get the shell jump perfectly right off the bat. But it never hurts to do a little bit of a turn back. Also, I should mention, there's nothing forcing you to actually spin jump here. If you wanted to do a controlled shell jump, you could, but with the spike ceiling the way it is, it lines up for a max height spin jump quite nicely. And then that is the end. I think that's pretty much everything in the level. Oh, actually, there's one other thing I wanted to do. I'm going to go over the practice setups that are included in the level. If you're someone who's going to be rebuilding the level anyway, it's not going to matter much, but I did see some people who are playing this level, namely Yoshi and Space Pig, who were using the practice setups that I have included but didn't know quite how to line them up. So this first one here, I saw Yoshi, I think, go like this. He would wait, and then he would do like this tiny jump like that, and then go like that. And that works, but it's just going to give you a lot of positional variance. So for this, all you need to do is grab the shell, hold run, jump, and forward, and then it should just line you up if you twirl and throw the shell, like so. So then the next door up there, you can see it, is for this reclaim. You just hold run, jump, and forward. You should automatically land on this shell. This one's pretty self-explanatory, and it lines up for the rest. This one, you need to be holding jump, so you jump to trigger those on-off switches. That's going to allow you to just have an easy way to hold jump here without having to hold it in the door or hold it after you start falling, which is going to mess with your positioning slightly. And then the last practice setup here, you need to throw this bomb in here so that it, nice, so that it blows up the on-off switch at the right time, and then you're going to want to jump off this donut, land on the leftmost half of that shell so that you don't fly into the spike, and then do the Nye like that. And that is the whole level. So yeah, thanks to everyone who's still watching at this point for watching. I commend your patience. I would encourage any level creators who are watching this to try and do this with their own hard Kaizo levels. I think it's highly beneficial to players who really want that extra practice option to have some of the creators' insight on their levels. And if you're a player who appreciates what I'm doing here with this level, spread the word. Share this video around. Try and get some other level creators that you whose levels you enjoy playing, or whose levels you think would benefit from this kind of analysis, to do something like this in their future videos. I would appreciate it, and I'm sure the community would too. So yeah, that'll be all. Special thanks again to Anthony for suggesting this video, and let me know in the comments if you are interested in seeing this for some of my other levels. I'll probably be doing this for my future hard levels anyway, but if you guys would like a retrospective on something like Deep Jank 9 or the 1437 meter dive, definitely let me know, and I would be happy to do that. Thanks again. I'll see you guys around. Bye-bye.